This is the story of Daniel Mercer and his wife Claire Mercer. They had been married for 7 years, long enough to stop noticing each other. Not long enough to admit it. Daniel worked in municipal planning, a man of careful measurements and slow decisions, and Claire had built herself into the kind of marketing strategist whose name was mentioned before meetings started. What held them was not affection, exactly. It was architecture, a mortgage, a cat named Pepper. Saturday mornings that followed a script so familiar neither of them had to speak. The tension between them was not loud. It was the tension of two people who had once reached for each other in the dark and had, at some point, neither could pinpoint, stopped. What would unravel was not their love. It was the story they had each been telling themselves about why it was enough. The evening of Claire's company holiday party. Daniel ironed his blue Oxford shirt in the bedroom while she stood at the mirror applying lipstick, a shade darker than she wore on ordinary Thursdays. He noticed. He didn't say anything. That was the kind of husband he had become. A man who noticed things and filed them away without comment, the way you notice a small crack in the ceiling and decide it isn't structural. "You look good," he said finally, because silence felt worse. She glanced at him in the mirror. "Thank you." A pause. "You're wearing the Oxford. Is that okay?" "It's fine, Daniel." Fine. The word had taken on a particular weight in their marriage. Not the weight of contempt, but of a door, left slightly open that neither of them would walk through. The party was held in the upper floor of a renovated warehouse space downtown, the kind of venue that felt aspirational, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Claire's company was small but ambitious, maybe 40 people, and they moved through the crowd the way couples do at work parties, adjacent but autonomous. Daniel fetched drinks. He made conversation with a project manager named Tom who had opinions about urban transit. He was, he knew, competent at this. The attending a party as a husband function. It was near the end of the evening when it happened. A man named Garrett, mid-30s, the kind of easy confidence that came from a good jaw and the certainty that rooms arranged themselves around him, appeared beside Claire with a drink in each hand. Daniel was 6 feet away, returning from the bar. "Is this your wife?" Garrett asked the man beside him. Not Daniel, gesturing at Claire with the loose amusement of someone already 3 drinks in. "She's married," someone answered. Garrett smiled, looked at Claire directly. "You available, though?" It was a joke. The kind men like Garrett make at parties, harmless in the way a match near gasoline is technically just a match. Daniel watched Claire's face. He was close enough to see it. The small flicker, the half-second of something that was not offense and not quite amusement either. Something quieter, something that looked, from where Daniel stood, like consideration. Then she laughed. "Definitely not," she said, and touched Garrett's arm lightly, and the moment dissolved. But the half-second did not dissolve. Daniel carried it back to the bar, ordered himself a whiskey he hadn't planned on, and stood there turning the moment over in his mind the way you turn a stone and wonder what's underneath. On the drive home, Claire talked about the music and someone's terrible speech and the food. Daniel said yes and smiled and drove. He was good at driving, at keeping his eyes on the road and his hands exactly where they were supposed to be. In bed that night, she was asleep within minutes. He lay awake watching the ceiling. The crack was still there. He had been telling himself it wasn't structural. He wasn't sure anymore. The weeks following the party arranged themselves as weeks do, with the ordinary persistence of a life continuing. Daniel went to work. Claire went to work. Pepper the cat grew fatter and more indifferent. They ate dinner 4 nights out of 7 at the kitchen table, and on the other 3, one of them was working late or had a thing. The thing about emotional distance is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a reason or a scene. It accumulates in the negative space between 2 people, in the conversations that don't happen, in the questions one person stops asking because the other stopped answering with any real weight. Daniel had stopped asking Claire about her day, not out of cruelty, out of the quiet recognition that she no longer seemed to need him to. She had a full life inside that office, and he existed, he sometimes felt, at the periphery of it. This was not something he could say out loud without sounding like a man with an accounting grievance rather than a marriage one. What he did instead was watch. He watched the way she angled her phone slightly away when she texted now, the way she had started going to the gym at 7 a.m. on Saturdays, which she hadn't done before September, the way she spoke about her coworker Marcus, her creative lead, the one she was developing the Harmon account with the particular fluency of someone whose thoughts about another person have become well worn. Marcus thinks we're overcomplicating the campaign, she said one evening, not looking up from her laptop. What do you think? Daniel asked. I think he's right. It was not the words. It was the ease of the agreement, the absence of her usual friction. Claire, who had strong opinions about everything from traffic patterns to the proper way to load a dishwasher, had discovered that Marcus was right. Daniel set down his fork and looked at his plate. She didn't notice. 2 weeks later, he found a message. Not through snooping. He wasn't that kind of man, or hadn't believed himself to be, but through the ordinary accident of her phone lighting up on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. Can't stop thinking about what you said last night. I keep replaying it. It was from Marcus. He put the phone down exactly as he found it. He stood at the counter for what felt like a long time, the kitchen around him as familiar and suddenly foreign as a room you've known in a dream. She came downstairs in her robe, towel around her hair, and poured herself a glass of water. Sleep okay? She asked. Fine, he said. The word had come back to him. He understood now what it meant to use it. He waited 3 days before saying anything. This was not strategy so much as the behavior of a man who needed to understand what he was dealing with before he opened the door to it. Daniel was, by temperament, a person who prepared, who measured twice. He sat with what he knew. A single message, an unnamed last night. The slow accumulation of months. And he tried to be honest with himself about what it meant. He brought it up on a Sunday evening, no occasion. They were doing the dishes, one of the few domestic rituals they still shared without negotiation, him washing, her drying, Pepper moving between their ankles. Are you happy? He asked. Claire turned the plate in her hands. What do you mean? I mean here, with me, with this. He gestured at the kitchen, at the implicit whole of it. She didn't answer immediately. The silence was different from her usual silences. It was careful, like someone picking through a room where the floor might give. I think I've been a lot in my head lately, she said, about the promotion, about everything. He handed her a glass to dry. Is Marcus part of everything? She went still. Not the stillness of guilt caught flat-footed, the stillness of someone who had been waiting at some level for the question and was still not entirely sure how to answer it. We talk, she said quietly. About things. The kind of things that are easier to say to someone who doesn't. She stopped. Who doesn't what? Who doesn't already have a version of you in their head? The sentence landed the way certain sentences do, precisely, in a place that cannot be defended. Daniel dried his hands on the dish towel and leaned against the counter. He looked at her the way he almost never did anymore, fully. Did anything happen? No. Did you want something to? She put the glass down carefully. Her voice, when it came, was honest in the particular way that makes honesty worse than a lie. I wanted to feel like someone saw me, like I was interesting, not comfortable. Interesting. And I don't make you feel that. You make me feel safe, she said. That's not the same thing, and I know that's not fair. He nodded. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask for apologies or issue ultimatums or do any of the things that a confrontation is supposed to produce. He stood in his kitchen and absorbed it, the way a building absorbs stress, invisibly, structurally, at the level of the material itself. I think, he said after a while, I need some time to think. He slept in the second bedroom that night, not dramatically. He just took his pillow and went. And Claire sat in their room in the dark and did not call after him, and that silence, perhaps more than anything else, told them both what they needed to know about where they were. By February, they were living in the apartment like two people who had agreed to share a building but not a life. Civil, considered. The kind of polite that has replaced something warmer and in doing so made its absence permanent. Claire got the promotion in January. Senior brand director. Her name appeared first on emails now. Daniel sent her a text. "Congratulations, you earned it." And she replied with a thank you that took 30 minutes to arrive and read like something she'd edited. He understood. He was glad for her in the specific and melancholy way of people who no longer feel they're allowed to be simply glad. She had lunch with Marcus twice that he knew of, and then, as far as he could tell, less. He didn't track it. The emotional affair, if that's what it had been, seemed to have wound itself down the way those things do when the container of secrecy is removed and suddenly the feelings have to exist in the open air and can't sustain it. Marcus was a mirror, Daniel had come to understand, not a destination. Claire had needed to see herself reflected as someone still capable of being desired, of being new to someone, and what she'd found was the information itself, not the man. This did not make it easier. It made it, in some ways, more difficult, because there was no target for his anger, no villain to simplify the story, only two people who had failed each other at a frequency too low to hear until the house was already shifting on its foundation. He started running, not out of self-improvement mythology, but because he needed somewhere to put the hours and the mornings had grown too quiet. He ran along the river path and thought about the shape of his life, not bitterly, but with the careful attention of a man taking an honest inventory. He had been a good husband in the contractual sense, reliable, present, but he had not, he admitted to himself, somewhere around mile 3 on a gray Thursday morning, been curious about her in a long time. He had stopped asking her what she was afraid of, what she wanted that she didn't have, who she was becoming. He had confused constancy with intimacy. Knowing this did not redeem anything, but it changed the quality of the sadness, made it less about what she had done and more about what they had, together and separately, allowed to atrophy. Claire, for her part, had moved through January and February with the efficiency of someone who has made a decision but not yet found the courage to say it. She had been planning, he understood this now in retrospect, to leave when she was financially independent of their shared income. The promotion was the mechanism. She had been building a life that could exist without him while still standing in his kitchen every morning, and the patience that required was either calculation or its own form of cowardice, and perhaps both. In March, she asked if they could talk. He said yes, the way he said most things now, without surprise. They met at the kitchen table, which felt right, somehow, the place where they had most often been almost honest with each other. No wine, no occasion, the overhead light and the ordinary Tuesday evening. Claire had prepared. He could see it in the way she held her hands. She was wearing the gray sweater he had given her 2 Christmases ago, and he didn't think it was intentional, but it landed anyway. "I think we both know what this is," she said. "Yes, I don't want to make it ugly. I don't think either of us deserves that." No. She looked at him across the table with something that was not indifference, and not love, but the complicated specific residue of having been someone's person for 7 years and knowing you are about to stop. "I'm sorry," she said, "not for wanting things, but for the way I handled it." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Outside, rain had started against the window, the unremarkable March rain that commits to nothing. "I've been trying to figure out when we stopped," he said. "I'm not sure we ever decided to. It just happened." Yeah. He looked at his hands on the table. He had spent 3 months preparing for this conversation, and now that it was here, he found that most of what he prepared was unnecessary, that the truth had its own economy, and what they needed to say was very small compared to what they had already understood. "Was there a version," he said, "where this worked out differently?" She considered it with the seriousness it deserved. "I think there was a version where we both tried harder 5 years ago. That's not a useful thing to think about." "No," he agreed. He thought about the party, Garrett's joke and her half-second. He thought about the dishes on a Sunday evening and the message on the counter and the pillow under his arm as he walked down the hall. He thought about the way she had once described what she wanted from life. They were 29, early in the marriage, driving back from somewhere. And how fully he had listened then, how completely he had let that habit lapse. He did not say any of this. "I hope the promotion is everything you needed it to be." he said finally, and he meant it. Not with bitterness, not with performance, but with the plain sincerity of a man who had loved someone genuinely and was making his peace with having done so imperfectly. Claire pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright in the way of someone who has decided not to cry. Take care of yourself, Daniel. You too. He stayed at the table after she left the room. Pepper wandered in, circled once, and settled against his ankle, indifferent and warm and there. The rain continued. He did not move for a long time. What he understood, sitting in the kitchen that had seen 7 years of them, was not profound in the way of revelations. It was simpler and heavier than that. He understood that love does not fail dramatically. It fails in the accumulated weight of unasked questions and unoffered presences, in the long patience of two people deciding, without deciding, that the distance is easier than the crossing. He had not been wronged so much as he had participated in the slow work of becoming invisible to each other, in the daily small choice of comfort over contact. He had loved her. She had loved him. Somewhere in between, they had each become something the other had stopped reaching for, and neither of them had said a word about it until the house was already still. He put the kettle on. He stood at the window and watched the rain. He was 41 years old, and alone in a kitchen he would soon need to leave. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt entirely, uncomplicatedly present. In his own life, in his own body, in the quiet aftermath of something real that had ended the only way it honestly could, that too was something.